Egbert of Wessex is considered by many to be the father of England. But why? And was he actually any good at being king? Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to find out. Egbert became King of Wessex in 802 AD, after his father King Kenric died. Egbert inherited a kingdom which had been significantly weakened under his father's rule. Not only that, but when he came to power, the Anglo-Saxons were in full-blown civil war with one another. And even worse than that, there were Viking invasions happening all across England. Despite these setbacks, Egbert managed to unite the Anglo-Saxons against the Vikings and win, eventually conquering all of England except for the Danelaw, which is an area in the north of England today, comprising of parts of Yorkshire, Nottinghamshire, and Lincolnshire. After conquering the rest of England, Egbert went on to establish a strong centralized state in Wessex and set the foundations for what would become the Kingdom of England. So let's take a look back at how Egbert managed to do this. Egbert ascended to the throne of Wessex in 802. He was born in 770. So he was around 32 years old when he took the crown. But his father, King Kenric, had given him a pretty shitty situation to inherit. You see, just 2 years before Egbert took the throne, King Kenric had led a coalition of Anglo-Saxon kingdoms into battle against the Mercians. The Mercians were an Anglo-Saxon tribe who lived in the middle of England today, more or less the same territory as the modern-day Midlands. For some time, they had been ruled by Afa, one of the most powerful kings in Anglo-Saxon history. Afa had managed to conquer large parts of northern and central England, subjugating many other Anglo-Saxon kingdoms to his rule. And things got so bad between Kent and Mercia that it nearly split the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in two. Eventually, the other kingdoms got fed up of being bossed around by Afa, and they allied together with Wessex to defeat him at the Battle of Booth in 796. However, despite winning this major victory, King Kenric was killed in the battle. This meant that not only did Egbert have to deal with the aftermath of a civil war, but also that the alliance between Wessex and the other kingdoms was very shaky at best. Most of them were keen to keep their distance from Wessex and basically just mind their own business. But if that wasn't enough problems for young Egbert to deal with, the Vikings were also beginning to invade the coasts of England with increasing frequency. They pillaged towns and monasteries, stole shit, and generally caused havoc all over the place. By the time Egbert took the throne, it was clear that something needed to be done about the growing Viking threat. But dealing with external threats wasn't going to be easy. As we said, the other kingdoms refused to help Wessex. They didn't want to risk losing their newfound freedom by getting involved in a war. As such, Egbert began by strengthening Wessex's defenses and building up its army. He also made alliances with the local lords in an attempt to bind them closer to the crown and thus ensure greater military support. After about 10 years of preparing, Egbert finally felt ready to take action. In 815, he defeated the Vikings at the Battle of Carhampton. This victory marked the beginning of the end for the Viking raids along the south coast of England. Although Egbert's victories over the Vikings were significant, they weren't exactly impressive. Basically, he caught them by surprise and won because they weren't expecting an attack. Once word got around among the Viking leadership that Egbert was a bit of a hard nut to crack, they stopped attacking Wessex and instead focused their efforts elsewhere. In the meantime, while Egbert was dealing with the Vikings, the Kingdom of Northumbria fell into civil war. Now you might remember them from episode 18 when we talked about the last pagan English king, Egbert. His campaign against the Vikings had proven to the other Anglo-Saxon kingdoms that Wessex was actually pretty useful to have around. So now they appealed to Egbert for help to put down this rebellion. This gave Egbert the chance to stick it to the Northumbrians, who had raided Wessex in the past, so he obliged and helped put down their rebellion. However, Northumbria was completely knackered after this civil war, which made it easy pickings for Egbert, who went on to conquer the kingdom. From here, he pushed further north and conquered the kingdom of East Anglia. With these two kingdoms added to his domain, Egbert turned his attention back to Mercia, whom he had defeated 20 years earlier under his father's banner. Mercia had grown weak after the previous war, and Egbert easily defeated them, conquering the kingdom and adding it to his growing empire. The last kingdom standing was the Kingdom of Essex. It was a small kingdom located in the southeast of England, which capital city was London, which makes it the oldest capital city in England. Egbert demanded that the King of Essex pay him tribute, but when he refused, Egbert invaded and forced him to become a vassal of Wessex. At this point, Egbert's empire covered all of the landmass of England except for the Danelaw in the north, which was still controlled by the Danes. In fact, in 825, they even pushed as far south as London, plundering the city and killing Egbert's son. However, this would prove to be their last major push south. Only a few decades later, Egbert's son, Ethelstan, would go on to conquer the Danelaw and finish the process of uniting England under one ruler. So we can see that Egbert didn't really win any major battles. All of his victories were either due to enemies being distracted or weakened or both. That isn't to say he was a bad king, though. While his military achievements were underwhelming, he was incredibly successful at setting up a centralized state in Wessex. Under his rule, the royal court moved from Winchester to the new royal capital of Egbert built at Enham Palace. Egbert reformed the system of local government, creating the offices of aldermen and shilling to help manage his expanding kingdom. These officers acted like governors, collecting taxes and maintaining law and order in their regions. He also established a council of nobles called the Witan, whose consent was required for major legislation. In addition to reforming the government, Egbert also introduced a new legal code called the Doom Book, which standardized laws across his kingdom. Despite all of these administrative reforms, Egbert maintained the predominantly Germanic customs of the Anglo-Saxons. He didn't try to change the culture of his people, unlike, say, the Romans did with their provinces. Instead, he chose to build upon existing traditions, which helped maintain stability throughout his vast kingdom. One of the biggest problems facing England at this point was the lack of mints. There were no facilities for producing coins within the country, so all currency was imported from abroad. To fix this, Egbert set up new mints across Wessex, producing coins stamped with his likeness. These coins became the standard currency across England. But perhaps Egbert's greatest achievement was in the area of education. He established the first schools in England, both for the children of nobles and commoners. Egbert himself was a patron of learning and is credited with writing several important texts, including an epic poem called The Battle of Maldon. Under his rule, Wessex became a cultural hub, attracting scholars and writers from across Europe. As you can see, Egbert was a great king despite not being a great warrior. He brought stability to a land torn apart by civil war, set up a strong central government, and reformed the legal and educational systems. He defended his people against external threats and established Wessex as a cultural center. So I think it's fair to say that Egbert earned his title as the Father of England. Egbert died in 839 after ruling for 37 years. He was succeeded by his son, King Ethelstan, who went on to conquer the Danelaw and unite all of England under the banner of Wessex. If you want to learn more about Ethelstan and the unification of England, then check out the next video where we'll be covering his life and reign in depth. Thanks for watching.